But for today's call, oh, Antron, right on. Today's call is a little bit bittersweet. You're going to hear from Antron, who many of you have gotten to know through the last 2 years almost with CTIPP. Antron, sorry, Andy just popped into the waiting room. Antron has been leading our work around building trauma-informed approaches to youth advocacy for the organization, and has been building out capacities and training to promote that. And Antron's going to share a lot of that work here today. After Antron presents, I will share some work that another student intern, Peyton Barcel, has also been doing. Peyton is, I think, today graduating from Columbia University, and so congrats to Peyton. So was not able to be here on this call, but has also been doing tremendous work. So that's obviously all very good news. As you know, this isn't going to be news to anybody who's involved in this work, but obviously the funding landscapes and capacity landscapes of building partnerships with folks in this work has changed a lot over the last several months. And, we know that there are folks who have been disproportionately impacted. And, our thoughts are honestly with everybody throughout this movement who's been impacted on a very regular basis. And we're not immune from that either at CTIPP. And the work with our youth advocacy work was a part of a 3-year project that was generously funded. And Antron's been working on this for almost 2 years now, helping to build capacity. And, Antron, I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, but, so please feel free to reiterate your experiences. But just to give some folks context, Antron started working with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, NCTSN, when he was 18 years old. He's been part of NCTSN with their Youth Advisory Council and Young Adult Collective. YAC changed names because Antron and his colleagues grew 18 years older. And so, youth advocacy was not as good of a name anymore as Young Adult Collective at some point. But we had a tremendous plan to be able to test out the youth advocacy series with NCTSN to help build in hopefully the next generation of a youth advisory council. Antron, the goal was for him and his colleagues to still be involved, but obviously now in their mid-30s, 18 years after getting involved as 18-year-olds, bringing in that next generation of youth was a big hope. And then being able to scale through NCTSN's network and then be able to scale beyond just NCTSN was the theory of change that we had developed for the 3-year pilot of our youth advocacy work. And with the funding cuts that have taken place at the federal level, NCTSN is completely funded federally. To let folks know, they have not lost all of their funding at this time. And so NCTSN will still be around, but the innovation to be able to drive that type of change and this sort of like innovative pilot that we had been planning for the better part of a year, Antron, with them was stopped in its tracks. And in the last year of our grant, we had, our funding partner, we're very grateful, was understanding and able to give us some flexibility. But with that, I say all of that as pretext to unfortunately deliver the news that this will be Antron's last CTIPP CAN call as a member of CTIPP staff. It's been a difficult transition process, obviously, and Antron did not need to join today's call and, present on what he's going to share with all of you today. But I think that Antron, that speaks to the character that you have and the heart that you have for this work generally in terms of, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share and for you to take that and to have been such a good teammate throughout this, 3-month process since we discussed kind of where we were going to need to go from a budget perspective is beyond admirable. And I just want to share with, the whole CTIPP CAN community that's on the call today, how much of a joy and pleasure that it's been to work with Antron over the last couple of years and what he's brought to the table. And so over the last several months, since the initiative and the process with NCTSN got stopped, we have worked very hard. Antron has really led the effort to try to take all that we were going to do with groups and to pilot an exercise that we were then hoping to scale and put it all online, and make it asynchronous to be as best as possible with our current capacity struggles in terms of this project. And so it's not online just yet. We're building that out now, but Antron, before, last day of May, and then it might take a couple extra days because our colleague Laura is going on a special birthday vacation with her mom. And so we might get it up on the website after, but we will have all of these resources that Antron is about to discuss on our website, trying to support youth advocacy broadly. And so for today's call, Antron will speak for somewhere around 45 minutes. I will stop speaking soon. Antron will talk for about 45 minutes about the work that he's been building, as well as the purposes and why youth advocacy is so important. And then with the last half hour or so of the call for folks who want to remain on the line, we would love to hear the ways in which folks are already mobilizing around youth advocacy, what more could be done to support those efforts, and how people see youth advocacy as being able to be impactful within the efforts that you all are already involved in or are hoping to grow. And so, AMAC, I hope I didn't step on the toes of your presentation, but know that, I was supposed to give a little bit of context there. And without further ado, turn it over to you, man. And thank you again for your leadership on all of this work and for being with us today.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. Can everybody hear me okay? Is the volume okay? Thumbs up. All right, perfect, perfect. So we'll kind of jump right into this. Thank all of you for coming out, for being on the call today. Some of you I've met in the past. Some may have heard my story, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Antron McCullough. And so again, it's just great to be able to join all of you today. And we're going to talk a little bit about this youth advocacy series that I created to really help build those conditions of empowerment for young people. Wanting them to get involved in advocacy and the trauma-informed movement as much as possible. And so we understand that young people have that valuable and they have that unique lived experience that really plays an important part and an important role in being able to shape this work that we all do. And as we kind of move forward with it, understanding that the work is never done. And so although, yes, unfortunately, my time here with the campaign for trauma-informed policy and practice, as you guys know, as CTIPP, is officially coming to an end at the end of this month. We know that we have to continue this work because it's just very, very important. And so the objective of this youth advocacy series, this project was, again, really to create a space for youth to have a voice, to be able to advocate for themselves and others, especially when they're facing challenges that can really lead to a lot of trauma. And so, like I said, I've told my story in the past, but I'll just kind of update some of you who may be new to the call or new over the past year or so. And so a question that you might have for me is, well, why did I get involved in the advocacy and why am I so passionate about this subject? And so I come from a child welfare background. I was in the foster care system, adopted, had a failed adoption, and then was placed back into the foster care system until I aged out at the age of 18. And I remember all throughout my time being in foster care, I felt like I was pretty good kid. Great grades. I even remember so much as crying when I had a B on my interim, which on my progress report, which wasn't even a real report card. It was just someone who always wanted to do well and to stand out. And so I remember throughout my life up until up until about age 17 and a half, actually, where, I would go to court, see the judges for different matters. And pretty much they would always say, well, it seems like you're a good kid. Seems like you're doing well. So this is what we're going to do. You're okay with that? Yes. All right, cool. But what they were doing is the questions that they were asking me, it wasn't so much of actually giving me a choice. It was more so them just saying, hey, it looks like you're doing great. And so we can just go ahead and move on and allow you to move forward. There's nothing that can be done. And so if you imagine working in a community or organization that's focused on child welfare, where you've identified that those systemic challenges that are hindering effective support for at-risk family, as well as for youth not having that voice on their own cases and being able to have some input. And so one of the things that I focused on was really improving those outcomes in the systems where there were significant disparities. And so this really became my initial steps toward advocacy. And so the creation and what I was building and trying to build a movement and a coalition and a youth advisory council really involved collaboration with youth in the system, with young adults, with caregivers, the local court administrators, social work, as well as individuals who are in our state capital here in Tallahassee, those congressmen and women. And so I saw an opportunity to really improve my work within trauma-informed spaces by really leveraging that collaboration and those cross-sector partnerships to help streamline the services and help to improve the outcomes, because I understood that the existing ways of having that inclusion were outdated, and it was siloed within different departments, and the processes that really hindered individuals like myself having an effective voice within that decision-making process. And so the work that I've done in the past really has helped to lead in policy change around advocacy and normalcy here in my state here in Florida, where those state and those county and district regional leaders, they express that strong support, which align with those broader initiatives, and being able to commit resources and to help facilitate the implementation that was needed. And this experience, what it did was it really highlighted the importance of youth voice and being able to drive that change and being able to really foster that collaboration across those different diverse stakeholders. And so that cross-functional initiative, what it did was it resulted in having transformative change. First, it helped to really improve youth and caregiver satisfaction. It gave youth a voice. And it also increased having a more inclusive and more supportive work partnership between the youth and the administration. And so my philosophy for really centering youth voice and those with lived experiences, really by taking that proactive approach to systems change on different topics such as trauma, right? Because we can yield those positive outcomes through collaboration, through innovation, and really a focus on holistic solutions. Because we understand that each real world situation, it presents unique challenges, but also opportunities as well. But the principles of the cross-sector partnerships and being able to create problem solving, it can be adapted to drive that impactful change in what we're looking for. And so what I did with this series, we built out 8 sessions, and we began by really discussing why advocacy is important for the trauma-informed movement as we work to create those conditions of safety and empowerment for youth, for the teens, for young adults, and anyone else who wanted to get involved. And so here at our organization, we believe that trauma is not just an individual experience, right? It's a collective journey of resilience in understanding and transformation. And so we provided resources and additional resources as well that will be sent out, policies to really help support those young people in their advocacy journey. And so as young people decide or want to become advocates, they have that unique ability to really turn that personal pain into powerful social change, being able to take action in the things that they're doing. And so the guide was really designed to help them navigate that complex landscape of trauma-informed advocacy and build those meaningful coalitions and create sustainable networks. And so our goals, looking at the 8 different modules that we created in session 1, it was really about gathering what youth are interested in, right? It goes back to what I spoke about, is allowing them to be part of the decision-making process. Session 2, we talked about being able to create a shared vision, and beginning to kind of build out what that strategy would look like for a coalition. And then in session 3, starting to sketch out how we wanted to communicate that need for what it is that they wanted to advocate for, and being able to create an elevator pitch and developing how to deliver that story itself in session 4. And then in session 5, thinking about what ways we wanted to deliver to other individuals to really grow that coalition and support those individuals and getting them involved to build that power. And then in session 6, 7, and 8, what we wanted to do was mobilize those stories from young people and that strategy for policy and for systems change, and discussing also that self-care and collective care, because we know that this work can be challenging at times. And then allowing those youth in the last session to really share, as they come back to the strategy that we created in the other sessions and those settings, and being able to kind of create that path forward and what that looks like. And so youth advocacy has been an important factor in being able to really improve systems and supporting different structures. And here at CTIPP, we've seen that it has done that and its promise. And so just to kind of refer back to on some of the accomplishments that the organization has had, include policy and funding improvements through federal reform and funding for trauma-informed care in schools, and then child welfare system, and really being able to expand and training programs while also being able to adopt different frameworks. Also building out that community support in those initiatives that's really geared towards trauma-informed integration within youth advocacy organizations, and working with legislators and collaboration for those trauma-informed systems. And so these achievements, they really begin to highlight the growing recognition of trauma-informed practices as essential in youth advocacy, but it also ensured that systems were not only addressing those immediate needs, but also being able to foster that resilience in that healing for future needs. And so as we kind of like reflect on what a trauma-informed journey looks like, oftentimes it will bring a profound sense of growth and deeper and more empathy. And that journey, it really tends to transform individuals, not only at the professional level and a professional practice, but also an individual's personal perspective on being able to heal and have that resilience, and the role that we play in being able to work with and support others. And so one of the challenges that we saw, or the problems, was that we saw that there was an opportunity to really leverage that collaboration and that cross-sector partnership in trauma-informed spaces, and really being able to streamline the services and trying to work to improve those outcomes. Again, we know that current and existing inclusion strategies are really outdated, where they have those siloed departments and those processes that hinder that effective voice during the decision-making process. And so we understand that trauma-informed advocacy really recognizes that pervasive impact of trauma on individuals, and it integrates an understanding in all aspects of support, but also in service provision. And so this approach that we took, it's crucial in fields where professionals often work with individuals who have experienced significant trauma, including social work, healthcare, education, as well as the legal system, for example. And so trauma-informed advocacy, what it aims to do is to create that safe and supportive environment that where we're able to promote that healing and empowerment while also minimizing the risk of re-traumatizing an individuals. And so it also recognizes that pervasive impact of trauma, and it integrates an understanding into all aspects of support in on service provision. And so, but still also adhering to those principles and adhering to safety and trustworthiness and peer support, collaboration and empowerment, cultural sensitivity, where all of that can really help individuals who are wanting to advocate and creating an environment that's going to be able to help promote that healing and that empowerment for individuals who have dealt with some type of trauma. And so I feel
Andrew, I am so sorry. You are on a roll, man. I just want to make sure that you don't have slides.
no. Oh no, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay. We just weren't seeing them, and I
I
apologize for
apologize.
breaking up the momentum.
No
I just
slides.
wanted to make sure.
I wanted to talk to all of you today.
Yeah,
Want
I knew that we were.
all to,
My bad, man. I'm
no
going back
worries.
on mute. I'll stay there.
Want all of you to be able to see my lovely face, hear my lovely voice the entire time, but no slides. But as Jesse said, that we are working to get everything online. So maybe look forward to that sometime in June, early July sometime. But so when we're looking at trauma-informed advocacy, we know that it can improve individuals' outcomes by really being able to address what the root cause of their distress and being able to provide them with some type of tailored support. And by understanding the impact of trauma, we understand that advocates or individuals who are wanting to advocate can develop more effective strategies for intervention and for recovery. And so by implementing trauma-informed practices, that requires ongoing training, it requires policy change, and really a commitment of continuous learning, as well as adaptation. And so advocates must really stay informed about new research, about best practices, but also with emerging trends in trauma-informed care to provide the most effective support that they can. And ultimately, those trauma-informed advocacy, what it does is it helps to lead to those improved outcomes, and it reduces that risk of re-traumatization and enhances that trust and engagement and builds that comprehensive support for individuals on their way to recovery. And so with today, what I really wanted to do is just kind of set out a clear structure on why youth advocacy is important in trauma-informed settings. And so wanting to make sure that we understand that youth advocacy within trauma-informed contexts to specific applications in schools and homes and in communities. And then I'm going to end with some practical implementation strategies that we can use. And as Jesse said at the very end, we can kind of talk through what are some things that you guys are already doing or looking forward to doing in the future. So I've included, well, I'm going to include just some real world examples just to really kind of illustrate the concrete impact of youth advocacy and what that looks like. And so I'm going to address some matters within schools, within homes, while also being able to expand that into the community so we can have that holistic healing, but also being able to maintain an overall hopeful tone, although we know that we face challenges, still wanting to make sure that this is an overall hopeful tone, but also action oriented to continue to do the work that we're doing, or maybe this is a place for individuals to get up and start. And so I'll just kind of jump right into it, is that with youth advocacy, is really a topic that is not only close to my heart, but I think that it's also fundamental in being able to create healthier and more resilient communities. And so I wanted to explore that critical importance of youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings and how empowering young voices can really help to transform our schools and our homes and our communities. And so when we talk about trauma-informed approaches, we're recognizing that trauma is not rare, right? It's actually pretty common. According to the CDC, there's about 61% of adults who have experienced at least one type of adverse childhood experience, and about 1 in 6 have experienced 4 or more. And so these experiences, they really can profoundly impact that development, as well as that health and those outcomes, but also those future opportunities that exist. However, today, not I'm not here to simply just discuss trauma as a problem, but really to highlight how youth advocacy represents one or most powerful solutions, particularly when we create trauma-informed environments where young people are empowered to speak, where they're able to lead, and where they're able to have a voice and help also to create that change. And so let me kind of clarify a little bit about what I mean by youth advocacy when I talk about it in trauma-informed settings. So what it means to me is youth advocacy, generally it occurs when young people actively participate in being able to identify different problems, wanting to develop solutions and implementing changes that affect our lives, right? And so in trauma-informed settings, what I was just saying was that I wanted to clarify what we mean by youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings. And so understanding that youth advocacy, what happens is that it occurs when young people are actively participating and being able to identify problems and developing those solutions and implementing change that really impacts and affects their lives. And within trauma-informed settings, this means creating those spaces where a young individual's voice is heard, where it's respected and centered, especially those who have experienced adversity or trauma. And so this approach, it recognizes fundamental truths by first, young people are experts in their own experiences. I've told a number of individuals that for us as professionals or individuals who are doctors, in order to be able to do the work that we're doing, that we have to hear those stories from those individuals who have that lived experience. And so that's where it first comes from, individuals who are experts in their own lived experience, no matter how well intentioned we might be as professionals or adults. We don't always and can't always fully understand what it means to grow up in today's world with today's challenges, where young people, they hold that those crucial insights that we miss when we aren't actively listening to them. One of the things that Jesse mentioned earlier was about the Youth Advisory Council, and us changing the name to the Young Adult Collective, because we had grown up and grown out from being kids, and we felt that, hey, we're young adults now at this point, and we're continuing to get older, and so we can't be looked at as youth anymore. But we also must make sure that we're ushering in those new youth who are coming into the system or getting ready to age out of the system and wanting to take over the council. And so secondly, we understand that trauma often involves a profound loss of control, but as well as a loss of voice. And so when young people experience trauma, one of the most damaging aspects is the sense that they have no agency, that they have no say in what happens to them. And so youth advocacy directly counters this by being able to restore their voice and restore that choice. Third, what it does is it empowers young people to create positive ripple effects throughout communities. And so when young people advocate for themselves and others, they're able to really help develop those critical leadership skills, while they're also simultaneously creating more responsive systems. And so let's say, for an example, if you consider, I'm gonna go with Jill. We'll do Jack and Jill. So if you consider Jill, and let's say that she's a high school junior who's experienced significant childhood trauma, and she found herself struggling in a traditional school environment. And so rather than accepting the label of being a problem student, she joined the Youth Advocacy Council at her school. And so through this platform, she helped develop a quiet room where students were able to experience emotional distress, and where they were able to self-regulate. And that was a resource that benefited not just her, but also countless other students who were dealing with trauma and responses within the classroom. And so that example just kind of illustrates how youth advocacy in trauma-informed settings isn't just theoretical. It creates those tangible improvements that adult-only decision-making matters may not ever be able to achieve. And so when we talk about what it looks like in schools, and especially critical in those educational settings, schools often represent the most consistent institution in many young people's lives. For 6 to 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, young people have navigated these spaces, making schools either powerful sites of healing or sometimes, unfortunately, places where trauma can be reinforced. And so when schools embrace trauma-informed youth advocacy, several transformative changes can occur. First, if we look at things such as the discipline policy, we can improve that dramatically, right? Traditional approaches often re-traumatize youth, re-traumatize students, and oftentimes also disproportionately impact those who have already experienced adversity. And so when young people participate in being able to develop discipline policies, we can see that there will be a shift towards restorative practices that address those underlying needs rather than merely just punishing them for their behavior. Over in California, in Oakland Unified School District, for example, those students were advocates for themselves, and they helped to implement some restorative justice practices that reduced their suspension rates by 87% at one school, but it also created those healing circles that address the root cause of the conflict. Secondly, when we're looking at curriculum becoming more engaging and relevant by having young people to advocate for themselves within trauma-informed school settings and being able to push for curriculum and content that reflects their lived experience and addresses real-world issues that affect their communities, where this then increases that engagement while also being able to provide opportunity for them to process and make meaning of those difficult experiences within their lives. And then third, what it does is it helps with their mental health and those resources and hopes to really improve that substantially, where youth advocates, they're consistently identifying mental health support as a top priority, and they're advocating for accessible counseling, for peer support programs and wellness centers. And so at a time when approximately 1 in 5 young people experience some type of mental health condition, these advocacy efforts are literally things that can help save their lives. And then when we're looking at schools and climate and how that's able to transform within the school systems, we understand that when young people and students, they've led anti-bullying initiatives, they've created peer support networks, and they've also designed inclusive spaces where the entire school in that community, they would benefit from that improved safety and from that belonging and from that well-being. And so if we consider, for an example, over in Washington State, there's a youth-led initiative called the Mockingbird Society, where they were able to successfully advocate for policy changes that dramatically improve educational outcomes for youth in foster care, which we know is a population that experiences trauma at a very disproportional rate compared to others. But that advocacy really helped to lead to legislation ensuring that there was educational stability immediately and enrollment rights and dedicated support staff for these youth. And so this isn't just meaningful for the youth advocates themselves, it also creates that ripple effects that's able to transform the entire educational systems. And so when we move from the schools and systems to families, while schools represent critical settings for youth advocacy, the home environment is equally important. Family systems that incorporate youth voice can help create that resilience that extends far beyond the family unit itself. In trauma-informed settings, youth advocacy means being able to create those structured opportunities for young people to influence those family decisions, from simple choices like meal planning to more significant decisions about family rules or practices. And so being able to develop communication and patterns that validate young people's perspective, even when us as adults don't always agree with the youth, this model really helps to have those healthy conflict resolutions while reinforcing that a young person's viewpoint do matter, and while we're also not tokenizing them. Just for an example, how I first got started into this advocacy work, once I graduated high school, or as I was getting ready to graduate high school, I was coming to a child welfare organization for about 2 weeks straight, where they were taking my story and it was like, this is a success story. It's a success story for an individual like myself, one, being a male to graduate high school and go into college, two, being a Black male to make it out of the foster care system, to graduate high school and to get ready to go to college. And I just remembered that probably after about a week and a half or so, I made a joke where I said, I'm coming here every day. Like, you guys might as well just hire me on. And I said it as a joke. And I remember that next week, they gave me a call and they said that, hey, we have a position that we created for you. And how do you feel about that? And being 18 years old, what is an 18-year-old kid going to say? And I remember just telling them that I have to cut my hair now. And everyone thought it was funny. And I'm just like, because in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to start growing my hair out, and doing this and doing that. And that's the only thing that I could say at the time. But years later, and as I developed and became an adult, I understood and realized that what was I actually getting out of being able to tell my story? What was I getting back from it? And while I don't feel like they were tokenizing me, or at least not doing it on purpose, I understood that if I'm coming here every day just to say that, hey, I'm a statistic, but I'm a statistic on the positive end, or maybe even considered an outlier on the positive end of being a statistic. Again, me telling my story, what is it really doing for me? And so being able to really build that collaborative problem solving and those approaches where those challenges are addressed together, rather than just through those top-down directives. And so these practices, what they do is they directly counter the powerlessness that characterizes those traumatic experiences. And so when young people know that their voice matters at home, at schools, in the community, they're able to develop internal resources that help them to navigate those challenges throughout their lives. While working in the child welfare system, some individuals that I work with really described how a woman that I work with, how she described how being able to incorporate her teenage son's voice within family decisions helped to transform their relationship after having years of conflict, where she following her son's exposure to community violence. And so when she started asking instead of telling him, she said that she had discovered that he had solutions that she would have never thought of, that she would have never considered. And more importantly, he began trusting her more and began to feel like he was actually being heard. And so this approach, when we're looking at family engagement, doesn't mean that it's taking away that parental responsibility, but rather it's recognizing that trauma-informed homes help to balance that structure and nurturing with that authentic opportunities for a youth to have that voice and to be able to have that leadership as well. And so now we've talked about the schools, we've talked about the family. We're going to get into community and community building and what that looks like within youth advocacy. So beyond the schools and the home, youth advocacy, it plays that critical role within the broader community, where communities, they face systemic challenges, from violence to poverty to environmental hazards, oftentimes where it marginalizes young people's perspectives. Yet young people experience these challenges just as much as others, and oftentimes they actually may have the most creative solutions. And so when communities embrace those trauma-informed youth advocacy, we've seen several powerful outcomes, where first we've seen that public health initiatives become more effective. Young people, they've been able to successfully advocate for accessible mental health services, for substance abuse and prevention programs tailored to the needs of those youth, and also within that trauma recovery and those resources and services that actually work for those young people. we've also seen where juvenile justice systems have also improved, where you have those youth-led reforms, and those efforts have been able to reduce incarceration rates, that expand from diversion programs and create that restorative approaches that decreases that increases more healing. And we've also seen where community development becomes more inclusive. And so when a young person participate in being able to design those public spaces or planning those community programs or addressing neighborhood challenges, the results and the solutions have better outcomes, and it also better serves everyone's needs. And so if we consider the Youth Justice Coalition in LA, where young people have directly impacted by trauma and the justice system, where they've been able to successfully advocate for policies that have reduced the youth incarceration rate by over 50%, and being able to save taxpayers millions of dollars while also creating safer communities. Or if you look at the Youth United for Change in Philadelphia, where you have students able to secure funding to transform large and impersonal high schools into smaller learning communities with trauma-informed practices, and being able to create dramatic improvements in the graduation rates, as well as within the school climate as a whole. And so these examples, they really began to illustrate just how advocacy doesn't just benefit the young people who are involved, but it really helps to create more responsive, more effective systems for entire communities as well. And so how do we effectively actually do this? How do we support youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings? So what I want to do now is just kind of outline 5 key strategies that I thought about. And so first is by providing those authentic opportunities. I just kind of gave the story here a few minutes ago about not wanting to be tokenized. So not tokenism, but young people, individuals are very able to quickly discern the difference between something that's meaningful and them being involved versus just symbolic inclusion, right? So having effective youth advocacy means really being able to share actual decision-making power, and not just inviting young people to rubber stamp those adult created plans. And even in this work, as Jesse said earlier, that we were doing, our plan was to have youth in different youth groups to come, although yes, I built out this 8-week module series, but also having their input and having their voice and saying, hey, this is what we like, this is what we actually want to see change, this is what we want to implement, and these are some things that we can look at that maybe we can take out because maybe it doesn't fit for the work that we're trying to do, or maybe they look at it from a different perspective. And so what it does is it helps develop those skills, and it helps build those pathways, because young people need that support to be able to develop their advocacy skills, from being able to do public speaking to policy analysis to community organizing. When we invest in being able to build these capacities, we create that pipeline for effective youth who are wanting to be advocates in their own right. Also ensuring that accessibility and inclusion is there. And so youth advocacy, it includes diverse voices, particularly those affected by trauma and systemic challenges. And this means addressing practical barriers like transportation and timing, sometimes compensation, while creating culturally responsive environments for them, and establishing trauma-informed foundations where youth advocacy can operate from these different trauma-informed principles, but still recognizing that some advocacy and some activities may activate some of their trauma responses. And so this means building in options for participation. It means ensuring that they have that emotional support and creating predictable, transparent processes. And then finally, really being able to celebrate that progress while acknowledging those ongoing challenges. We know that this work that we do, it can be a challenge, and sometimes we may feel burnt out. And so one of the things that we want to encourage youth to do is to be able to acknowledge those wins that they're having, because what that helps to do is that having effective youth advocacy, what it's able to do is balance and acknowledge those hard realities, that recognizing the power of collective action, but also building hope for them, and letting them know that, hey, some things may not always go the way that we want it to go, and maybe we need to look at it from a different perspective. But if we celebrate the challenges that we're having, then we know that we're making some success as we're moving forward. And so I think a solution for this is that when we have advocates, again, want to encourage those individuals to really actively participate in their advocacy and in the decision-making process. And as we empower the youth, that involves being able to recognize what their strengths and capabilities are. It means providing them those opportunities for them to be able to really express their needs, as well as their preferences, but also supporting their autonomy. And so here at CTIPP, when we start building out this youth advocacy series guide, it explored those principles of trauma-informed advocacy, what the importance of it was, and some practical strategies for implementation. And so it served as a tool really for youth to develop that voice within the decision-making process that impacts their lives. And it, again, like I said, we wanted to include those diverse voices, and including youth with learning differences and accessibility, and providing that training and understanding for generational movements around trauma-informed advocacy. And so this guide was built out to really look at those different things and explore those different principles of trauma-informed advocacy, the importance of it, and those practical strategies to being able to implementate. And so young advocates that are involved, those individuals who are involved within the decision-making process, we understand that we want to value their input and encourage them to take on those active roles. Again, I am working with the NCTSN. I am an individual that started when I was 18. And so I've already, half of my life already, I've been working with this organization. And so I understand that collaborative approach of empowerment, how it fosters that sense of ownership over my own trauma recovery journey. And so our trauma, this guide, I don't want to call it a training, but it ultimately, what it does is it represents a path to being able to have deeper understanding, to have that resilience, but also to have that purpose. And it fosters that dedication to being able to support others through compassionate, informed practices, while we're emphasizing the importance of empathy and self-care, as well as systemic change. And so the guide, it provides a comprehensive understanding of what it is to be trauma-informed in the critical role of advocacy and supporting individuals and promoting that systemic change. And it was designed for those individuals interested in really becoming effective trauma advocates. And it combined theoretical knowledge alongside with those practical skills to help empower those participants to make that positive impact in different areas of advocacy for trauma. And so by supporting trauma-informed advocacy, what agencies, what professionals are able to do is get together and work with youth and really contribute to a positive cycle where youth receive that care and that empowerment that they need. And agencies, they're able to achieve their mission with greater impact, while they're also fostering that compassionate, effective community. And so as I'm getting ready to close up here soon, and as I, with our time together, I want to really emphasize the profound ripple effects that emerge when we embrace youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings. And so for individuals, young people who are doing this advocacy, what it does is it helps to transform those trauma narratives from stories of powerlessness to narratives of agency and impact. And so this isn't just psychological healing, it creates those tangible improvements within academic outcomes, within both indicators, but also within future opportunities. And so for systems, whether it's schools, families, or communities, youth advocacy, what it does is it really creates that more responsive, effective approaches to those complex challenges where young people's perspectives bring those fresh insights and those innovative solutions, but also that authentic accountability. And then when we look at it as a society as a whole, being able to invest in youth advocacy really creates a more just, a more equitable future. And because today's youth advocates, they become tomorrow's civic leaders, where they're carrying those trauma-informed perspectives into every sector and everything that they're doing. And so I begin today at the beginning by noting how common trauma is in young people's lives as well as in adults. And this reality, it can feel overwhelming. But what I want to emphasize is that trauma-informed youth advocacy, it really represents one of the most powerful responses, not just to heal that past harm, but really to create those fundamentally different futures for those youth. And so when we empower young people to advocate within trauma-informed settings, we don't just address individual experiences of trauma, we begin to transform the conditions that created trauma in the first place. And we build those communities where all young people can thrive regardless of what they've experienced. And so this work, again, it isn't easy. It requires adults to really share that power in ways that may feel uncomfortable. It demands that resources and patience and a willingness to hear difficult truths, but the alternatives is continuing in systems that silence young people's voices, and particularly those who have experienced trauma, where it costs far more in human potential and community well-being. And I'll give one final example of an individual who I know personally at the time, where they talked about why did they get into advocacy, who had experienced significant early childhood trauma. And so when asked why youth advocacy mattered to them, they said that when I advocate, I'm not just a victim of what happened to me, I'm someone who can make sure that it doesn't happen to someone else. And that right there changes everything. And so that's a little bit of my story as well, is that I understand that I'm still connected to child welfare, but the challenges and the situations that those youth are going through right now, I'm half of my life, 18 plus years now removed from it. So I don't know directly what they're going through, and I'm looking at it from an outside perspective. And so in a lot of the work that I do, I will kind of sit back and I will let others speak. And if there's any opportunities, I'll tell individuals that if they ask me to do them, I'm more than willing to help out with those opportunities. But I also want to give other individuals a chance. I want to give other individuals that opportunity to be able to have that voice to speak out and talk about the different traumas and be able to work with them to become advocates for what the change that they want to see in their lives. Because that's one of the things that I first started. I wanted to see normalcy within the child welfare system. And so being able to advocate and talk to our politicians here in Florida and get legislation passed to be able to have some normalcy as a youth growing up in the foster care system. I want for others to be able to have those same opportunities to look at certain challenges and situations and say, hey, I want to be able to have effective change. I want to be able to advocate for this, because when I advocate, I'm not just a victim of what happened to me. I'm someone who can make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else. And again, and that's what really makes all of the difference. And so I know I've been talking for a long time now, and I just want to thank all of you for your time, for your attention, and looking forward to still having that continued conversation about how we can collectively support youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings. And in doing so, also creating communities where all young people can heal, where they can lead and they can thrive. And so it looks like we are right at 3 o'clock, a few minutes before 3 o'clock. And I know Jesse said that we can either be in a larger group or breakout sessions and just kind of talk about some of the work that you guys are currently doing for youth advocacy within trauma-informed settings or within other settings where you have youth advocacy. Are you building coalitions? Are you forming youth groups to be able to have those conversations? Are you giving them those choices, those opportunities, and are you allowing them to be a part of the decision-making process? So with that, I will end here, and I will just say again, thank all of you for your time and for your attention, and I will pass it back over to Jesse.
Appreciate it, Antron, and thank you again for the work that you've done with us. Getting lots of snaps and claps on the Zoom screen. You know, we're a relatively small group. If folks prefer or would like to go into a breakout room, I'm happy to put some folks, if you let me know in the chat. Happy to open up smaller breakouts. And also if folks want to stay in a larger group, to learn as a whole with the remainder of time together, would love to open it up and hear about the ways in which you're seeing youth advocacy mobilize, some of the concerns, if you have any, about you know, how youth advocacy is being mobilized, any hopes and goals you have moving forward. We would love to hear any and all thoughts that you all have and see.
Comment.
Go ahead, James.
Antoine, I like what you're saying. I believe the future of this is with the youth, because what I've noticed through my experiences, older people get entrenched with their thoughts, beliefs, and values, whatever. But when you start with the youth, they catch on quickly, and they want change. Therefore, they'll cling better, if you can understand my meaning. And the future of this is with the youth, because the youth will carry it on and keep it going. Whereas with older individuals, they're more or less stuck in their ways, entrenched, I like to say, and you have to dig them out. All right, that's the end of my comment. But I agree with you 100%, Antoine. Also, I put my contact information in your thing. Please do call me.
Thanks so much,
Thank you,
James.
James.
Appreciate that perspective.
Antron, I've had 9 young adults in my home in the last 8 years, mostly because my community Facebook page has said, help, we don't have a safety net for this person. And I find that if they're in that situation where they're not safe, it takes me about 1.5 years to get them to the point where they're feeling safe enough to even contribute. Credibility helps, but my community doesn't tend to lend credibility, so it's a fight. Are you finding a way that you can support young adults to start contributing more quickly, or how do you support them? You know, safety, connection, empowerment, but I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to, a lot of times what they'll say is, will you please, I'll be here with you, but will you please be my voice for a period of time? And I know that's hard too. So just any thoughts you have on that would be really helpful.
So if I hear you correctly, it sounds like how do we get youth involved and then being able to get them to have that voice to finally want to kind of speak up? Yeah. Okay. So I know within the groups that I've been a part of, a lot of it is really just been asking, where the opportunity wasn't there before, and individuals wanted to say something, but the opportunity just wasn't there. And so what I've seen that has been helpful is that when you give that opportunity, then creating a platform of and asking them, what is it that they want to do? Do they just kind of want to sit back and just kind of watch before they start speaking? Do they want to be involved in certain aspects of the youth group that they're a part of? And actually, I don't remember what session, but one of the sessions that I created actually explains all that out, how to get a youth group involved from start to finish and being able to really build out that coalition. And so what you do is you're really putting it back on the youth, because we always know that there will be a leader. There will be someone who's outspoken or who speaks the most. But giving them different leadership roles, but also giving them those leadership roles in a revolving structure. And so there's no one person who's always at the top, and where they're rotating into different roles, but also giving them the opportunity to stay in the role that they're in, because there might be an individual who doesn't speak up as much, but they want to take the lead on a specific project that's being worked on. And so what I've seen is, if you start at the beginning, and I know that some youth groups are already formed, but if it's a new youth group or new coalition that you're trying to build with youth, is if you start from the beginning by giving them that voice and choice and those opportunities to discuss what it is that they want to do, then they tend to lead the group themselves, and then they also tend to hold individuals accountable. What I saw that I would do is, whenever we would have our meetings, I would actually, I took it upon myself to start reaching out to individuals like, hey, we're getting ready to have the meeting, or if the meeting had already started, I'm texting them or sending them emails. Hey, the meeting has started, just want to make sure that you're able to attend, because maybe they're not checking their emails all day. Maybe they're doing something else, but if you send them a quick text, hey, the meeting has started, like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about it. Let me go ahead and jump on. And being able to attend and being able to contribute. So if you're able, whatever project that's being worked on, if you're able to work on it from the beginning, and setting that time and space and allowing them to set out what it is that each individuals want to do, then I found that to be very helpful in being able to move through the process from start to finish.
Thank you.
So I have a question. We have a youth group that we work with, and one of the things, and just listening to you talk, a lot of it like resonates. But I think one of our challenges is that we're trying to like create some sort of baseline of like a framework of like what they could expect to get out of it, but also then let them lead the conversation. And I'm just wondering like what your thoughts are about kind of balancing that line of like being the adult in the room that's like saying, this is the initiative that we're going to work on, so we have some sort of framework, but also like trying to like support their voice, but like trying to have those two kind of, I would argue, maybe a little less heavy with the adults in my particular case. So I'm just kind of curious about what your thoughts are about that.
I think if there's already a framework or already something that's kind of set in stone, where your agency says, hey, this is what we need to work on. We need to bring youth together. One of the things that I found helpful is to see if there are other things that are around that, to be able to build into that overall initiative. And so,
Okay.
say for instance, with my dissertation, they say that a good dissertation is a finished dissertation, and they tell you not to be too broad, to have it as small as possible, because you can't save the world all at one time.
Right.
So have those one or two questions that you have, but then later on you can always go back and build from that.
Yeah.
So within what you're doing, if there are other little small things that you can connect with that
Gotcha.
overall initiative, when you're having those conversations, then you can still do the overall initiative, but having them working on those small pieces to build in to get back to what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Looks like Michelle, you have your hand raised.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Frias, and I just wanted to share. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Antron. I feel like I came into this space because I was looking for a training, and I found these meetings, and then I'm like, this is a great opportunity for me to learn. So I am originally from South Los Angeles, California, and I've worked with the Department of Public Health to in the LA County, specifically the Office of Violence Prevention, Trauma Prevention Initiative. But recently, I moved with a nonprofit organization that is doing the exact same work. I just felt like I could be more like boots on the ground and be able to move things around, because I have experience with the Trauma Inform initiative, and then also doing the community organizing in my community where I grew up. But yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit. Hopefully you guys can, get some ideas or something like that. But we the areas that we help is in South Los Angeles, and there is areas that are unincorporated. So with that being said, is I don't know if you ever heard of the census or not, but the census, it tells you like how many people are in your area, what are those community members describe that their area is, and when they're going to get ready to put in some of that funding into those communities, some of those communities are cut off, meaning they don't have a council member. There is a huge lack of resources. So I help in those specific communities, and there is a lot of trauma, not only, with the everyday life, but also systemic traumas, because they're like, what do you mean I don't have a council member? What do you mean there's not enough funding? So this is where Los Angeles County comes in and tries to build that bridge with community and nonprofits that are doing the work in those areas. But we do have these coalitions that have been running for quite some time. I want to say it's almost about to be, I think it's been already like about a decade. They had a summit not too long ago. So there's a lot. I'm so glad that my communities are not the only ones that are experiencing all these things. And coming here makes me feel a bit more connected with others that are experiencing the exact same thing in other communities. And I would love to continue to come here, and also to invite some of the people that I know to be a part of this, that are huge advocates for youth as well. Like, so I think that it's kind of like a collision. If we all get together and put our brains together, we can find a way of how to steer ourselves into better things. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that we do have these collisions, and I really want to involve youth because I want to be very inclusive, and I want to be able also to invite all multi-generational, like nobody should be left behind, no matter of nothing, period. And I want to be able to invite also youth, but I'm trying to find a way. I want to still have these collisions, but still have one youth at least come out to these collisions or read about it or update them, and then they can take that information back. Sometimes when we're sharing information with youth, it lands so different when an adult is telling you than a peer to peer is telling you something. So that's where I'm looking. I'm looking for some ideas from you all here. And if I have anything, I'm all about saving somebody time. If I find something out that works, I'm more than happy to bring it here and share it, because I mean, let's not do redundant work, and let's work together smarter, harder, and not too complicated. But yeah, I just wanted to share some of that insight. And if you guys have any tips on or anything like that, please do share. I'm an open book, and if you have any questions or anything, you could also reach out to me, and I'll put my information on the chat.
Michelle, I have
Yes.
a tip for you. This is Chaplain James. I put my name and contact information in your thing, so do please use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And yeah, we would love to have you back every CTIPP CAN call, third Wednesday of the month. We will very likely increase security on the Zoom room, but all of you are welcome back, of course. So we'll get in touch there. But to that point, are there other ideas or thoughts or questions for Antron with regard to the subject at hand? Or for the rest of the group?
Yeah, this is very helpful, Antron. What do you see as the most common mistake that we adult-run organizations trying to engage youth do?
I think the most common mistake is having an objective and just sticking to what that objective is, and also just bringing youth in just because it checks off a box where they say, hey, we have to have that youth voice and we have to have that youth perspective. And we're just like, hey, you know, we need some youth to come in. We're going to give you guys some pizza and soda, come in. We're going to hear you out. But in the back of our mind, we already know, hey, this is what it's going to be. And so we're somewhat already tuning them out before it even gets to the meeting itself. And again, what I spoke about earlier is that a lot of times youth have some very innovative ideas that us as adults would not have even considered, would not have even thought about. You know, we understand that there are certain procedures and policies that are put in place for certain things, but do we even listen to them? And again, not, you know, tokenizing them, but do we actually listen to the words that they're saying and getting in those thoughts and getting in those ideas and then going back and even, you know, maybe respectfully, but sometimes challenging our administrators and saying, hey, like, I know this is what we're trying to do, but from the perspective of the individuals who we are trying to serve, it might better fit if we do this. And even if we can't do that entire thing, can we at least implement some of these things that we discuss with these youth? Because if we're not even going to implement it, then what's the sense of even getting those youth together? So I think that's probably the one thing as adults is that we'll just go right into it, already having our mindset what we're going to do. We're just bringing them to the table just to check off a box. Susie, did you raise your hand? Maybe you did. Maybe you just moved it. Yeah. Oh, I thought maybe you just moved your hand. I thought you were saying something. Sorry.
No, I didn't raise my hand. I will actually say something though. Thank you, Antron. This is my first time at this meeting. I'm so glad I found it. I came both professionally and personally. I really care about trauma-informed care and seeing it in our institutions specifically. I work for an organization called the Phoenix. We do free fitness, wellness, and community events programming for people who've been impacted by substance use disorder and or mental health challenges. I run a coalition of leadership. I'm in Philadelphia. I run a coalition of leadership that represent reentry services, anti-gun violence initiatives, and then youth work, but we serve 18 and older. So one of the challenges we come across is that a lot of the neighborhoods we work with want us to reach youth. And so what we're doing in this coalition is brainstorming and figuring out ways to reach youth by proxy of reaching the adults. And also, to your point, Antron, especially kids that are aging out, like to have a place. The way that our programming works is we only ask for 48 hours of sustained sobriety, but we honor all pathways to recovery for one. So we're not testing anybody. This is all honor system. And yeah, so I'm so glad that I came in on this day where you were talking about this, because you actually just put something in my brain, which is, why have I not reached out to actual youth, even though we can't serve them, but to join us to speak to? We're actually all trying to be like, what do youth want? What's going to call to them? You know, we have a guy that does like bar workouts out in the park. You know, I don't know if anybody's seen those, but it's kind of like a hip hop calisthenics, and he's younger, and it's like, okay, that's like a cool way, you know, but like actually trying to figure out what will resonate. So there's the question in there is, the challenge I've come across is, so yeah, we do work with folks that are in recovery, right? So, but we also serve mental health. So I'm challenged with like reaching youth without them hearing substance use disorder and just being like, that's not me, that's not something I want to deal with. But really what the underlying antidote, what we're creating is community, connective community that is just happens to be substance free. You don't have to be in recovery to join. You can be a family, friend, or ally. You can be somebody who's just sober curious, but it's just creating a space for healthy community building that is trauma informed. So I guess I'm trying to figure out how, or if anybody in here works with youth and has an idea or is working in this kind of gray area, because oftentimes these go together, right? Mental health issues and substance abuse, but sometimes people just close the door to one or the other and say, that's not for me. Yeah, so that was kind of a lot of information, but I just think this is so pertinent to what we're working on, and I would love to hear if anybody has any feedback.
I do. Susie, I put my name already in your thing because you do all the things. That's where I started. I started I was a KSAT before I came a chaplain, and then I started in trauma, but it all goes together for me. I find that CBT helps me with my trauma, and you see what I'm saying? It all goes together. Those people that separated them or don't discuss them, they are not knowing. I know. So I put it all together. And it's all that, ACEs, everything. It all goes together for me. So just give me a call and I'll help you out.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Yeah,
Can
the
I
more I
jump on the
work,
question of not being in youth spaces, and hi, I'm Andy. I'm from Origins Training. We're launching a resilience learning community, super interested in creating a space for people to learn and people to teach, and interested in getting the youth voice involved because there is so much youth wisdom. This is not a world that like I understand, and youth perspective is so important. Um, and so, Antron, like, interested to hear, silly question, but maybe like where to find youth, how to not tokenize youth, how to genuinely engage in a way that's rewarding for all parties involved. And just any thoughts or like do's and don'ts would be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really starts by doing some research and identifying. So looking to see if there are other youth coalitions within your area, social media, community centers, libraries, local government websites, etc. And then reaching out to teachers and counselors, other community or nonprofit organizations. And I think it's about really making that initial contact, being able to attend different meetings that may already exist or public events that are hosting different types of coalitions. And I think from there is seeing how they run their youth organizations, being able to speak with some of the youth who are there and ask them questions about their feelings or ask them why did they first join this organization. Going back to my example earlier, I started from a joke. I said that I'm coming here, interviewing with you guys so much you guys need to hire me on, for what I'm already doing, right? But I think that if you meet youth where they're at and in those spaces that they already are, they'll be very open and they'll tell you what they like and what they don't like as to not tokenize them. And so with this series, what we did was the first module was really building out trauma and what is trauma and getting them to understand that, not intentionally, but if something is said or something that is displayed, how that could be re-traumatizing to them, right? But then in the second module, it goes into coalition building and how do we really build those coalitions and how are they able to get involved, and what they bring to the table. And from that very first start is, as you're trying to build that coalition and making sure not to tokenize them, you give them that opportunity to be leaders. You talk about, hey, what is it that you want to create? What is it that you want to advocate on? And you'll get those different ideas. And then you start to build out what that leadership structure looks like for each individuals and who's going to work on what projects. So who's going to work on the public speaking, who's going to work on writing something up, who's going to work on the grassroots efforts, et cetera, et cetera. And then that gives them all an opportunity where they have that feeling of empowerment, where they have that feeling of belonging to something, where it doesn't just feel like that you're tokenizing them and just bringing them to the table just because.
Thank
Yes, and as Michelle said in the chat, mission and vision, that's also part of it as well, creating that mission and vision from the beginning.
Appreciate that. Sue, I just want to recognize, I think I saw you come off mute as well.
I was just going to say to Susie, you talked a little bit about different things that we don't look at, and I'm learning more and more that we do create silos. And when we start looking at, trauma and substance abuse and disability and mental health and religion and culture and all of those things, we really need all of them to build a coalition and to really understand each other and work with each other. And we tend to separate them and not, we get funding from mental health and then we can't deal with learning disabilities or whatever. And the more we can put all those things together and look at the whole person, it really does help.
Appreciate that insight, everybody's insight. This is such a valuable conversation. Are there any other thoughts from anybody before we move toward wrapping up the call?
I say I agree with Sue 100%. She has beautiful insight.
I'll just add one last thing, and that is, so once we get this out on the internet and it's published, we want, where you guys can utilize it, what we wanted to do was to be able to have that opportunity for you to take that information, but then work with your youth, and you can change it. You can change it according to your agency. You can change it according to the youth and what they see best fit for the project or projects that they're working on. And so although this is, it'll be a guide to, like a how-to guide to build those coalitions and how to create advocates for different challenges, trauma-informed, et cetera. What we wanted to do is be able to still be open enough where individuals can change it according to how they best see fit. So we will have that opportunity as well. And I'm sure Jesse will keep all of you updated once it gets published to the website with all of the activities and the slides and videos, et cetera.
You bet we're going to do that, Antron. You know that we're going to keep people updated, and you as well. I'm going to keep bugging you very, very much. But that's a good segue into, again, Antron's series that he went over. We're going to make that available in addition to the videos, and we will make the presentations and talking points for those presentations in case people want to deliver those in person, which we recognize the value of and plan to do that ourselves, but are just working under as best as we can under the current conditions. There's also a set of child safeguarding policies that Antron helped to develop that agencies can use to make sure that the right policies are in place. So that way we are doing everything that we can to protect young people as well as the organizations that we're working for. And so all of that will be packaged together in the website. Additionally, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Peyton's series, which is going to be 6 shorter videos, which were really made for a slightly younger audience. Antron's, like, we're trying to reach young people of all ages, right? Antron's workshops are not explicitly for older young people, but we were thinking high school into college age. And Peyton's is for a slightly younger audience, slightly shorter videos. And there's also a toolkit that we will make public that helps young people process as they go through the series to make sure that we're taking care of the emotional well-being of the young people that are engaging in that series as best as possible. And then we'll bring in that full youth advocacy, or the Advocacy 101 series and the textbook that we wrote out to have all of that in one place. And so we will come out with that next month. Y'all will see multiple emails about it, but we encourage you to use and share those resources. And again, next month, our CTIPP CAN call will be more process oriented. We're going to really strengthen the network. And I think based on conversations we've had in the past, we will likely be talking about the confines that we are currently working through with respect to the language of doing trauma-informed work in the current context, how we navigate, for instance, with writing grants where we may not be able to use certain language, or engaging in communities that are difficult. We've heard that come up time and time again, and we will engage in collective conversation. There won't be a presentation really for that. We want to create shared wisdom and really learn from that group process. And so expect to see some communication for that. And Andy, you beat me to the punch, but just to end this really special call, Antron, I'll tell you this on a one-on-one call again, but I think the receptivity, the reflections back throughout this presentation show how important the work you've done over the last couple years with CTIPP have been, and our organization is better for you having been a part of our team. And, I wish that the context was different, and this stage and chapter of our relationship together wasn't coming to an end the way it is. But I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your passion for the last 2 years on today's call with the group, and just really honor and cherish your work and who you are as a human being. And so want to celebrate you and say thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Jesse. Definitely appreciate that. And again, although I'm leaving, doesn't mean that the work that we are doing is over. It just means that currently I'm a free agent right now.
Appreciate it.
Terms, yeah.
We love sports terms. Thank you all for spending time with us. Look forward to seeing you next month and months ahead. Take care, be well, and never hesitate to reach out if you need anything.